Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 3, Texts 14 and 15.
I, Yamaraj, Indra, the King of Heaven, Nirriti, Varuna, Chandra, the Moon God, Agni, Lord Shiva, Pavan, Lord Brahma, Surya, the Sun God, Vishvasu, the 8 Vasus, the Sadhyas, the Maruts, the Rudras, the Siddhas, and Marichi, and the other great rishis engaged in maintaining the departmental affairs of the universe, as well as the best of the demigods headed by Brihaspati, and the great sages headed by Bhrigu, are all certainly freed from the influence of the 2 base material modes of nature, namely passion and ignorance. Nevertheless, although we are in the mode of goodness, we cannot understand the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What then is to be said of others who, under illusion, merely speculate to know God? Purport. The men and other living entities within this cosmic manifestation are controlled by the 3 modes of nature. For the living entities controlled by the base qualities of nature, passion and ignorance, there is no possibility of understanding God. Even those in the mode of goodness, like the many demigods and great rishis described in these verses, cannot understand the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad-gita, one who is situated in the devotional service of the Lord is transcendental to all the material qualities. Therefore the Lord personally says that no one can understand him but the bhaktas, who are transcendental to all material qualities. Bhaktya mam abhijanati, as stated by Bhishma Dev to Maharaj Yudhishthira in Srimad Bhagavatam. Nahyasya karhi chidrajan puman veda vidhitsitam yad vijigyasaya yukta mokhyanti kavayopihi. O King, no one can know the plan of the Lord, Sri Krishna, even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. End of the quote. No one therefore can understand God by speculative knowledge. Indeed, by speculation one will be bewildered, muhyanti. This is also confirmed by the Lord himself in Bhagavad-gita. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvataha. Among many thousands of men, one may endeavor for perfection, and even among the siddhas, those who have already become perfect, only one who adopts the process of bhakti, devotional service, can understand Krishna. In these verses, Yamaraj, who is one of the Mahajans, in this series of verses, he gives the names of the 12 well-known Mahajans. Well, he gives the names of 11 of them, and he includes himself. Vayam, we, I am also an authority. So he points to great personalities, leaders of the universe, administrative leaders. These great demigods, they're not only administrative leaders, but they're also highly knowledgeable. And he's mentioned the great rishis engaged in maintaining the departmental affairs of the universe. So they are, here it's stated, they are freed from the influence of the 2 base modes of nature. They're situated in the mode of goodness. But that is not sufficient to understand the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mode of goodness, as is stated in the Bhagavad-gita by Lord Krishna, gives rise to knowledge. Sattvam sanjayate jnana. But Yamaraj here, who is an authority on knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, states that the mode of goodness is insufficient. It is insufficient to be situated in the mode of goodness. That is not in and of itself a qualification to understand Krishna. So one gets knowledge in them by sattva gun, that it is favorable for knowledge to arise, or by following the mode of life that situates one in sattva gun, then knowledge arises, because part of being in sattva gun is study of shastra, hearing from knowledgeable persons. It's not just a matter of living in the country or something like that. Even the pigs and dogs, they live in the country, but that doesn't make them knowledgeable or in the mode of goodness. So it's also not just a matter of following certain rituals, but and following rules of cleanliness. There are many shastric rules which are to be followed if one is to be situated in the mode of goodness. Or rather, one who is in the mode of goodness automatically follows these rules governing cleanliness, rising early in the morning, dealings with others, not based on acquisitiveness or exploitation, but based on the principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that I'm not living in this world only for my own sake, but seeing everyone as good as a family member. Atmavatmanyate Jagat, and considering others just like oneself. So these are symptoms of the mode of goodness, which automatically gives rise to knowledge that we are not the body. Automatically means one hears, appreciates, understands. We're not the body. Human life is not meant for sense enjoyment. And if one goes even beyond this, one comes up to the activities of Shuddha Sattva. And one can begin to hear about Krishna. But the mode of goodness itself is not sufficient to understand the activities of the Supreme Lord. And Yamaraj is giving the example of the demigods. Although they're freed from the lower base modes of material nature, they're situated in the mode of goodness. But still, they have knowledge of Krishna. It's not that they're not wholly unaware of him, but their understanding is very limited. And in fact, the understanding of everyone is very limited, because Krishna is unlimited and the jiva is limited. So however advanced the jiva may be, his understanding of Krishna is always limited. That's why we'll find even great devotees saying that, their descriptions of the Supreme Lord, although certainly wonderful, they themselves say that I'm not qualified to describe him. This is only Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, in writing Chaitanya Charitamrita, says that I'm just capturing a tiny little bit of here. I'm putting a little bit of like a sparrow taking water from the ocean. This is the contribution Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's tremendous contribution. There's no literature comparable to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Even Srimad Bhagavatam, all the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam is there, and one cannot even properly understand Srimad Bhagavatam without understanding Chaitanya Charitamrita. What a monumental contribution. But he says that it's only a few drops from an incompetent person. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, one article, English article in the Harmonist magazine, he titled that "A Feeble Warbling." Now his voice is so powerful, it resounds all over the world and shatters the coverings of the hard coverings of ignorance in the hearts of whoever hears that. But he describes it as a feeble warbling. Can you understand what that means? No. Sorry. Well, Feeble means very weak, pathetically weak. And warbling is the small sound that a bird makes. So even the great devotees, they say they cannot understand Krishna. But still, it is our duty and our pleasure to attempt to do so. And that attempt to do so is glorious. And that attempt to glorify Krishna, even though by its nature, it's certain to be, from one perspective, imperfect, because it can never be complete. But then from another perspective, it's wholly perfect, because the endeavor to glorify Krishna is in itself perfect. Therefore, tadbhag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin patishlokam avadavatyapi namanyanantazya yashonkitani yachchinvanti gayanti gurnanti sadhavaha. Narad Muni says that description of Krishna, the unlimited Lord, even though imperfectly composed, is, from the grammatical point of view, it may not be as brilliant or well composed as something not describing Krishna. Generally, mundane Sanskritists, they think that Kalidas is the greatest poet in Sanskrit. And of course, although he did describe scriptural themes, he was more of a poet than a devotee. And in Bengali they say that Ravindranath Tagore, Robbie Tagore, he's the best poet. The Bengalis consider him the best. So certainly these poets are favored by Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and they're thus brilliant. But they're Dushta Saraswati. That's the real Saraswati is the Shuddha Saraswati, who is the potency of the Supreme Lord, who empowers the devotees to glorify Him. And in her perverted feature, she glorifies the non-devotees to glorify this material world and dazzle the non-devotee lovers of literature, and in this way bewilder them more and more and more. But of course in Bengali we have great poets, Vrindavan Das Thakur, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Narottam Das Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. How many shall we say? Great Vaishnava poets. And in Sanskrit, Vyasadeva, Lord Brahma himself, Venung Kvanantam Aravinda Dalaya Taksham Baha Vatamsam Asitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandara Pakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Vajami. It's very beautiful. Shunu Sukhadam, hearing is very beautiful. That's Shunu Sukhadam, that's Jayadeva Goswami, whose poetry is also exquisitely beautiful. He himself says that this poetry is very beautiful. He says, because the other day I was talking about this in one class, how devotees, they will praise their own writing. It's very good. Prabhupada used to say, these books are wonderful, because they don't think it's my property. They think I'm simply carrying it. It's not me, it's not my literary brilliance, but simply I am a passage, a medium, a conduit for that which is coming from higher sources through me who am unqualified. So that literature, even though imperfectly composed, if it is meant for sincerely glorifying the unlimited Supreme Lord, then even though it may have some literary faults, but still purified persons, Prabhupada uses this term, The word used in the Sanskrit is sadhavaha, the plural of sadhu. So sadhus, purified, Prabhupada translates this, sadhava, he gives a long translation. Purified men who are thoroughly honest, they will accept this. They will hear this and they will repeat it. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, is glorification of Krishna. Thoroughly honest glorification of Krishna. There's no dishonesty. Dishonesty means some personal motive that is rejected in the beginning of Bhagavatam. Dharma projita kaitava atra. That is rejected, and only the essence, Vedyam vastavam atra vastu, only the essence is given here in Srimad Bhagavatam. The essence of all the Vedas, which is glorification of Krishna. Therefore in Bhagavatam we don't have directions on dharma, artha, kama or moksha or medicine or warfare or astrology or vastu or any of these things which may be mentioned in other parts of the Puranas or in the Upavedas, but here only the essence. That jivasya tattva jigyasa, that human life is meant for inquiry into reality. And that param tattva, that supreme reality, satyam param dhimahi, who is to be always meditated upon, that is described here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the most ambitious project of Srila Vyasadeva. He has many ambitious projects. Mahabharata, ambitious to write such a book, such a big book, to write all these Puranas, to gather the knowledge. You could say we hear that Prabhupada, he took up the translation of Srimad Bhagavatam, an ambitious project, you can say, because it's a big job to write so many books with all the verses, with commentary. So ambitious, but even apart from this, the size and the scope of Srimad Bhagavatam, the subject is highly ambitious to attempt to describe the unlimited Lord. It's not easy to do so, but it's easier to describe, as in other Puranas he describes different gems and their qualities and the qualities of different metals, and so many subjects are described within the Puranas. But it's not easy to describe it. To become an expert in any field requires so much research and dedication. There are experts in so many fields. There's now this free encyclopedia on the web, homemade, in which people add their contributions. So there are experts on everything imaginable, and quite a few things we might not even imagined previously. So to become an expert on anything is a big topic. Vyasadeva is an expert on everything. He writes about everything useful to human society. And at the end he says, actually, this is all rubbish. Now let's talk about the real thing. Dharma kaitava projata atra, Vedyam vastavam atra vastu. That's, just forget all of that and let's come to the real thing now. Here's gemology, here's astrology, and here's vastu, and here's warfare, and here's medicine, and here's history, and here's geography. And just, throw it all out and let's talk about the real thing, which is Krishna, the real subject matter to be understood. Without understanding which, everything else is all completely useless. Shrama eva hi kevalam, simply working hard to acquire that which is of no benefit to us whatsoever, and is actually not only not beneficial, but it is harmful. It is harmful to us to acquire knowledge which is not for our ultimate benefit, because it makes us think that we're getting some benefit when it's not really benefit at all. Benefit for the mind or the body or going to the heavenly planets, it's not actually beneficial at all. The only real benefit, Shreya, the only real benefit for the soul is to be resituated in service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And other things seem like benefits because we don't know what our real benefit is. Because we think that we can be happy in this material world, and we think that anything that can contribute to our happiness in this material world is beneficial. But actually it's not beneficial, it's harmful because it reinforces the illusion that we can be happy here when we can't. And the attempt to be happy here is against our real self-interest, which is to forget or give up that attempt to be happy here and simply surrender to Krishna. So that's the real subject, Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu, real subject to be discussed. Atato Brahma Jignasa. Now let us inquire into reality. That reality is described in Srimad Bhagavatam. But to describe him is also not fully possible. But by his grace, he can be described and understood to some extent. And to the extent that the jiva understands him, he has benefited. And as long as he doesn't understand him, there's no auspiciousness in any activity. Shreya Shruting Bhakti Udasyate Vibho Klishanti Kevala Bodhalabde. That the attempt to find anything beneficial in anything else but pure devotional service to Krishna is compared to husking husks. Well, I'm sure you don't know what that means. That's when you get the rice, you beat it, and then the grain comes out, and the husk is left, the covering. So when you've beaten it and the rice grain comes out, the grain is what humans eat, and the husk is what animals eat. So it looks the same still. But so you might think, well, let's beat it again, because it looked like this before, and when we beat it, the grains came out. But you can beat it as much as you like, but nothing will come out, because there's only one grain inside each husk, and it's already come out. So it seems like we'll get some benefit from performing activities for the body and the mind, but ultimately there's no substance there. The real thing isn't there. So it's simply a waste of time and a foolish endeavor. Whereas the actually beneficial endeavor is to glorify Krishna. But then there's a problem, how can you glorify? As much as we can. That requires to come to the platform of Shuddha Sattva, beyond the modes of material nature. That is implied by Yamaraj here, by saying that even those who are situated in the mode of goodness, that in itself, although it's certainly more elevated than the lower, baser modes of nature, namely passion and ignorance, that Sattva Gun is not itself sufficient to even begin to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For that one has to go beyond the modes of nature. Mauntiyo vihabhicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. By taking up pure devotional service, one is awarded a position beyond the modes of material nature, in which one can understand Krishna, who is beyond the modes of material nature. So that requires coming to a higher platform, even higher than the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, one can begin to see, can begin to understand the existential position, that all this endeavor for happiness in this material world is simply illusory. So let us become detached from this material world. So one one starts to have higher consciousness. Then what to speak of those who under here, Yamaraj says, what is to be said about those who under illusion merely speculate to know God? They have some vague idea that there's God. You're not really sure who, what, or what it or he or that is. But they have some idea there's God. But then being covered by the lower modes of nature, how can they even begin to understand it? This is Yamaraj's rhetorical question here. How can we understand? How can they understand when even great personalities in the mode of goodness, they cannot understand him? Then what about those who are covered by the lower modes of nature? How can they even begin to understand it? That's why I'm not very hopeful about this interfaith, this idea of having interfaith discussions, because how much can people understand if they're eating meat and they're wholly materialistic? You can talk theoretically, this, that, but it's all theoretical. In the Vedic understanding is that even to begin to this atato brahma jignasa, to come to the higher level of understanding, one at least has to be situated in generic dharma. One has to be following regulated principles. Otherwise, what are you going to understand? It's not a matter of simply academic or theoretical understanding, but by purification of consciousness, one can have the opportunity to begin to understand. Purification of consciousness, that's only one factor, and the other factor is attaining the mercy of the Lord, which comes through submissive contact with his devotees. One's Mahat Kripa, Mahat Seva Dwaram, Ahur Vimuktes, Tamo Dwaram, Sanginam, what is that? Tamo Dwaram Sanginam Yoshita Sangi Sangam. Yeah. That by association with highly purified persons, Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam, that one by association with great personalities, then the door to liberation, highest liberation is open. But by association with women and persons attached to women, then tamo dwaram, the path to hell or darkness or ignorance, these are terms, tamo dwaram, the path of the door of darkness. So purified consciousness is required, and Mahat Seva, Mahat Kripa, that's also required. If one is to even begin to have the possibility of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's not simply an academic endeavor. And that's why actually Shastra is meant to be studied, like the Prabhupada had these daily classes, because traditionally Shastra is heard. We read. Prabhupada wanted his books widely distributed, and reading is an extension of the hearing process. But association is also essential to understand Shastra. If one approaches with one's own contaminated consciousness, then he will tend to project his contaminated perspective on what's being read. If one hears from even the message of Bhagavatam, if one hears from someone who's not situated in the line of Yamaraj, of the Mahajans, Mahajano Yena Gata Sapanta, Swayambhu Narada Shambhu Kumara Kapilo Manu, Pralada Janako Bhishma, Dalya Vyasaki Vayam. If one is not situated in the same understanding of following in the footsteps of the great devotees, Brahma, Shiva, Narada, Swayambhu Narada, Shambhu, who's next? Kumara, the four Kumaras, Kapila, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila Dev, Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, Prahlada, Janak Maharaj, Bhishma, Bali, Shukadev Goswami, they all have the same understanding. And there are many other Mahajans. These are 12 Yamarajas given examples. So if one is not situated in that understanding, then he's situated in misunderstanding. So his attempts to explain Bhagavatam will be projected through his not transparent consciousness, but opaque or translucent consciousness. And therefore, some light may come through, not all, and that will also be distorted. Therefore, Swarup Damodar Goswami, who among all the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who were living with him at Puri, his understanding was always correct. He was the Acharya. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the Acharya, but then as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became more and more absorbed in his own internal ecstasy, Swarup Damodar Goswami, he would give the Siddhanta. What is the proper understanding? So he told the poet from Bengal who was composing very nice poetry about Jagannath, but Swarup Damodar didn't like it. No. Everyone thought it's very nice, but he said, no, you've made a mistake. Jao Bhagavata Paro Vaishnaves Thane. Go. You have a taste for understanding Bhagavad, but you have to hear it from genuine Vaishnava. So if we don't hear from genuine Vaishnavas, then we'll hear from... Genuine Vaishnava means those who are strictly following the parampara understanding. Parampara means understanding means Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu. It means understanding means not imposing any understanding born from the modes of material nature, but simply presenting the fact of Bhagavatam as it is, magnifying the message of Bhagavatam, not distorting it. So if we don't hear from such devotees, then we're going to get instead of getting the pure Bhagavatam message, we're going to get mixed up with ideas for sense gratification, mixed up with the ideas of impersonal liberation, mixed up with the ideas of mystic perfection. Prabhupada gave Krishna consciousness as it is, so that it becomes more difficult or to misconstrue. And for those who are sincere to understand, who are sadhava, purified men who are thoroughly honest, they will appreciate the message of Bhagavatam. Those who are not purified, or those who have no proper desire to be purified, or those who are not thoroughly honest, they may prefer to hear something else. But Bhagavatam is specifically meant for nirmatsaranam satam, persons who are not envious of Krishna. They can appreciate Srimad Bhagavatam. Others may appreciate other things. There are other Puranas. There are other, even apart from the Puranic literature, there are so-called other religions which cater to the mixed desires of persons who, being envious of Krishna, may talk about God, but are not actually desirous to be situated in their dharma, in their eternal position of serving Him. So, interfaith means that if we give this highest knowledge, then persons, if they're actually serious to understand God, they should accept. There's no higher knowledge than this. But if they think, well, it's all the same and it's all comparable, and by our own academic and intellectual discoveries, we shall try to say what is the best, and comparing them all and none of them can really know God. Yes, we can know God through Bhagavatam. We can yes, we can know Him in full. We can, yes, Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, Yomameva samuro janati purushottamam sasarvavid bhajate mam sarvabhavena bharata. Krishna says that one who knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting, he knows everything in all respects. So we can know everything about Krishna, but we cannot know everything about Krishna because even He Himself doesn't know everything. So we can know everything as much as is our capacity, and we can know what's important for us to know, that He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and we are His eternal servants. And so that's the basic, and so many other things. What He looks like, what His name is, where He lives, what He does, what His favorite musical instrument is, what are His favorite foods, who is His favorite girlfriend. He has a girlfriend. Not like us rascals with our girlfriends. But that is Radha Krishna, Pranaya, this loving affairs, the transcendental loving affairs of Radha and Krishna. And then what He does, how He spends His days, and His different manifestations, how He manifests the spiritual world and the material world, so many things. Such knowledge of God is not to be found anywhere else. It's just some vague hints might be given, but most people who are supposedly followers of other supposed religions, most of them don't even get as far as the vague hints of something higher, but they mostly consider that He is the order supplier. His duty is to supply the fuel for our ever blazing fire of material desires. He should bring what we want to enjoy ourselves. Or they declare Him to be a non-person. Or they say we cannot discuss because He's too sacred to discuss. So it's many, many misconceptions. Bhagavatam gives the full exposition of the personality of Godhead, even beyond the Vaikuntha understanding, even beyond Dwarka understanding. The Supreme Lord, in His most intimate feature, when even He is not being the Supreme Lord, beyond being God, beyond His Godness, His personality. So, not easy to understand. Jananta eva janantu king bahutya name prabhu manaso vapasho vacha vaibhavam tavagochara. Lord Brahma said to Krishna that some people may say, I understand about Krishna, so let them say it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not possible for me to understand you either through mental or intellectual or any kind of endeavor. You're simply beyond the range of my knowledge. Therefore, simply offer obeisances. And by offering obeisances, then knowledge comes. So we don't know and we know. We cannot know about Krishna, but we must know. Otherwise, life is useless. And we can know, and so much about Krishna, because there's so much to know about Him. But even that so much, it's only a drop of His glories. And another point is that it's not just knowing, but to know Him is to love Him, and only by loving Him can we actually know Him. So these are some of the apparent, here's another word, conundrums. Means something, you say something, it appears to have two conditions which cannot possibly exist simultaneously. Just like if we say hot snow, it's not possible. Or a peaceful slaughterhouse. It's nice butcher. Well, some people think the butcher's nice, but we don't think he's nice. So like that, Bhagavatam describes Krishna, who is indescribable. We are exhorted to know him in full, although it's not possible to know him in full. But as Yamaraj says here, simply speculation, there's no way to understand him. One has to follow the Bhagavad process. This Yamaraj is speaking to his messengers, the Yamadutas, who are sinful persons. What are they going to understand? One becomes a Yamaduta due to being offensive. One gets that position. So people who are very envious of others, they get the opportunity to do something useful within the universal setup by venting their envy on persons who deserve punishment. But it's not a good position to be a Yamaduta. But nevertheless, they're connected with Yamaraj. So they're getting the opportunity here to hear from him highly exalted topics. And we're getting the opportunity to hear highly exalted topics, which are beyond, they would normally be considered beyond the capacity of such persons as us. When even Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma find these topics to be very high for them, then what to speak of us? But then we get again, Tadbhag Visargo, Janataga Viplavaha. It's meant for creating a revolution in the misdirected lives of a sinful population. So that is the another conundrum of Srimad Bhagavatam. That is, although it's meant for the topmost purified persons, it's being distributed among the bottommost contaminated persons. And by the mercy of the topmost pure devotee, the bottommost, most contaminated persons can also become purified by hearing the message of Bhagavatam. But by hearing the message of Bhagavatam, not any other message. This message received through the parampara, that will purify. And nothing else has the potency to purify. Hearing from the newspapers or from the university professors or some supposed religionist, this will not happen. The effect of Krishna consciousness will not be there. One has to be connected with the proper parampara, those who are in contact with Krishna, those who are Bhagavatas, devotees. They can explain Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Any question about this? I hope my language wasn't too difficult. We have a mixed crew here. Huh? You're from where? Brazil? Portugal. You're from Brazil? Yourself? From Switzerland? Oh, okay. It's really the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Wherever we go. Yourself, Prabhu? From Switzerland. Here's Vasudev Datta from Slovenia, who just came to visit me. Yourself? Sri Lanka originally. Settled here now. That's it. Yourself, Prabhu? The vintage, what is it?
Originals.
Vintage originals. What does that mean? Anyway, let's not waste our time trying to understand what it means. Born in Switzerland. And ethnic background of that body you happen to be in at the present time? Also from Sri Lanka? From Switzerland. Okay. But you're not one of the William Tell Swiss. Okay, never mind. Yourself?
Mauritius.
From Mauritius. All right. And ladies? Germany, Switzerland. Switzerland. Okay. It's good to have local devotees. When it's more non-locals, then we know we need to do more local preaching. So, Hare Krishna. Any question, comment, protest? Yeah.
The Srimad Bhagavatam is considered as Abhideya, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
It's considered as Abhideya. Well, Sambandha and Prayojan are both there. It's not only Abhideya. I mean, without this verse these verses we're discussing, they're on the topic of Sambandha. It's all there. Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan. I mean, where's that description from that it's Abhideya?
Well, I heard that the Bhagavad-gita is considered as Sambandha, then the Srimad Bhagavatam as Abhideya, and the Tsetse as Prayojana. So my question is, which one, Abhideya or Prayojana, is considered more important?
Well, unless I see that from an acharya and it's explained, it's difficult for me to accept that Bhagavad-gita is only Sambandha and Bhagavatam is only Abhideya and Chaitanya. I mean, in Chaitanya Charitamrita we have so much Sambandha Gyan also. Although it's certainly more than Bhagavad-gita points to Prayojan, but there's plenty of Sambandha Gyan. Eta Brahmanda Bhari Ananta Jiva Gancha Rashi Laka Jonite Kariye Brahman. Brahmanda Brahmate Kono Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Latapi. This is pointing out where we are. We're stuck in this material world. Then it goes on, this description to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions to Rupa Goswami. Then it says, Mali Hoya Shei Bij Kare or Aropan, that we take that seed and plant it, so that you go from Sambandha to Abhideya, and then it describes how that it makes the fruit of love of God. So in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions to Rupa Goswami, it starts with Sambandha, goes to Abhideya, and ends up with Prayojan. So they're all intertwined. There's no Prayojan without Sambandha, and vice versa. They're all intertwined. So Prayojan is the ultimate necessity, but like I say, there's no Prayojan when it's like saying, what's more important, Krishna or Vrindavan? But there's no Krishna without Vrindavan. There's no Vrindavan without Krishna. They're inseparable. Maybe you could say that yes, that Krishna is more important because Vrindavan, everything is expanded to serve Krishna. So you could say Prayojan is more important because Sambandha and Abhideya, they lead to that. But then without them, there is no Prayojan. So it's really a non-question, if you don't mind me saying so. If we only take Sambandha Gyan, just like we do a Bhakti Shastri course, and we don't take it up practically, then it's not very meaningful. We may have Sambandha Gyan, but we didn't really get it, because if we really got it, then we'd take up devotional service. As Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, Ham sarvasya prabhavo matas sarvam pravartate iti madva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. Those who know that I am the Supreme Lord, the source of everything, if you actually know, then you serve me. So really knowing means that you have to go to Abhideya. Otherwise, you can get a university degree or theoretical knowledge, but that's not when we talk about Sambandha Gyan, it's not talking about theoretical knowledge. So they're all inseparable, interlinked. Prayojan is, that's the very meaning of the word. It's our necessity, ultimate necessity. It's theoretically possible to have Sambandha Gyan, without going on to abhideya. But then it's not really sambandha gyan anyway. It's mundane actually. If one learns about Krishna but has no inspiration to serve him, then it's mundane. And that's what some people in the universities do. Not many, but there are some people who study religions. They just study it, and that's all. But they don't do it. Or they do so in a kind of academic way, without surrender, more with the mind than with the heart. Yeah, any other questions? Alright, so Hare Krishna. That's Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojan. All there. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna means Krishna is the Supreme Lord, we're His servants, we're asking for His service. So that's Sambandha and Abhideya. If we chant Hare Krishna, we'll achieve the ultimate goal of life, which is to always chant Hare Krishna.